Well, it's August and the clock is ticking for most of us. We are going through kind of our final preseason checklist. We're going through our gear. We're making tweaks to our bow. We're looking at our trail cameras. And in addition to all of that, running and managing your trail cameras through the month of August can really play a big impact or make a big deal on your hunting season. I know over the last handful of years, we've really noticed a couple things that have really stood out in August that have made a big difference for the early part of our seasons. So the very first thing I want to mention and talk about is probably one of the most impactful things that I've learned over the last couple of years about running trail cameras in late summer. And that is when to actually go in and pull or make that last card pull in late August. A few years ago, I heard Mark Drury talk on a podcast, and the focus was on how he utilized and managed trail cameras. The one talking point that I pulled out from that conversation was Mark not pulling his cards until after August 22nd. And you're probably wondering what's the magic rhyme or reason around August 22nd. If you're watching this video, I have to imagine you're a lot like us, whitetail fanatics, just consumed with the thought of hunting big whitetail bucks. And at some point, we're all trying to grab these tidbits of information and put them to use for us come whitetail season. So along that process, I'm sure you've probably heard of, or heard people talk about the process of bucks having different summer and fall ranges. Now, that doesn't always hold true, but there is often a shift. And that's certainly something that we've noticed over the last decade of running an absolutely absurd amount of trail cameras. But to Mark's talking point on that podcast, he mentioned a specific date between August 18th and August 21st of certain bucks having different fall and summer ranges coming back into their fall range during the summertime, thus leaving that late summer card pull after the date of August 22nd. So last year we really took note of, Mark's theory and tried to validate this, and lo and behold, there was a number of bucks coming back into their fall range during the summer between the 18th and 21st. So whatever you want to call this late summer excursion, we found it to be true. Again, it's not a shoebox, one size fits all process or theory answer, but it's something that we certainly valued of Mark's opinion and found it to be true in a lot of the parcels that we hunt. So this really becomes a big deal when you're on a new piece, or even when you're on a piece that you're familiar with and you just need to know that a certain buck is alive. And again, this isn't, it's not going to hold true for every single whitetail. As we all know, there's no shoebox answers, as I just said. But holding that post-August 22nd card pull date can definitely be a difference maker in your early season whitetail experience. The next thing I want to talk about with, an August checklist or August trail camera tips is transitioning food sources. We've ran cameras on beans all summer long. We've got that information. But now at the end of August is the time to really shift those cameras to food sources that are going to provide some value in September. So right now we're taking some cameras down, on these summer food sources. We got the intel that we need. And for me, regardless of what ground I'm hunting, if it doesn't matter if I'm in hill country, hunting big woods, or if I'm on ag ground or swamps, the terrain really doesn't matter. The tactic and principle is still really going to hold true. But the food source that I'm looking for in transitioning these cameras in are white oaks. So if you're in hill country, you can look at those western slopes. They typically not like to have moist soil, but not overly saturated soil. Again, white oaks grow all over the place, different subspecies or whatever, but in September, the food source that I'm looking for are white oaks. So finding those white oaks, transitioning your cameras now in August is a great start to your trail camera strategy for early season. So as we talk about transitioning cameras, we have to mention bedding, right? Everybody's crazed about hunting buck beds, finding bedding, running cameras on beds, and it really boils down to a couple different strategies. So we really break this down, hanging cameras and bedding, we break it down by short-term and long-term strategies. If you're looking for a short-term strategy, meaning you are on a piece that you want to hunt and you have cameras and bedding, you really should be using cell cameras. And cell cameras are going to give you MRI, the most recent information, and they're going to give you that in a manner or a time frame that you can physically act on. So depending on how you have your camera set up, you can have those pictures, photos, videos, whatever, transmitted to you in real time. And you're able to make real-time hunting decisions, which is a very big deal. Now, on the flip side, if it's a piece that you're just trying to figure out and you really don't have any anticipation or plans of hunting that piece, then we consider that to be more of a long-term set where you can go ahead and run standard SD card cameras on a set like that because there's minimal human intrusion. You're only going in there once. You're letting the camera soak for the season. But, you know, the MRI, there is no MRI there. You know, the card pull happens at the end of the year, and you have that information for the following season. So we can't talk about trail cameras in bedding without talking about spook proofing them, because the last thing anybody wants to do is, you know, negatively impact deer movement or alter the natural habits of a whitetail, especially in bedding. So, you know, the spook proof equation, we've done a whole video on that specific topic, but the gist of it is you want to hang the cameras out of the line of sight of whitetails. So typically it's 6 to 8 feet high for us, unless it's a true elevated set. We're using a tree that either has side cover, split trunk, is wider than the diameter is wider than the camera, so that there's no possibilities of that camera being profiled or silhouetted by that whitetail. And oftentimes we're using a piece of paracord instead of a strap. So super, super important when you're running cameras and bedding to kind of keep that a sacred spot. You know, no human intrusion. If it's a short-term set, you want to run cell cameras. If it's a longer-term set, you can get away with running SD card cameras.